Hey everybody, how's your coronavirus doing right there, right now?
Well,
mine's fine.
I've got it now.
Yeah, well, pretty sure we all got it. Pretty sure we're all going to get it.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with a little coronavirus.
Certainly affecting the world, though.
3% reduction in population is not a bad thing.
Yeah, well.
I know, heartless and cruel as that sounds, it is simply merely the truth. The universe doesn't care about you, nor me, nor Ed. And so whoever gets it
deserves it.
Deserves it, he says.
And Clint Eastwood once said in the movie Forgiven, deserves got nothing to do with it.
Blam!
And he shot off Gene Hackman's head.
Right in the kisser.
Right in the smack. Right in the
foul. Hey, Donald, quick question. Why are the cameras bouncing back and forth between me and Ed by themselves? Did you have audio follows video on there? Donald, I'm talking to you, brother.
Don't.
Oh! Miss Thing in the control room. Yeah, big round of applause for our control room. Donald Corkery, Suzanne Garcia, and in absentia, Mr. Alex Roberts, who is on location on a secret mission in Jacksonville, Florida, visiting our new mothership sister company. I'm not going to tell you who they are. You'll have to find out later. Anyways, yeah, big day here, really big day. Coronavirus is, proliferating. We're going to talk to Kevin O'Leary. He's going to be on the show here today. I actually had a conversation with him earlier in the week, but we're going to run it on the show for you. Mr. Wonderful himself was here, and of course, he was wonderful. Cameron Reilly is an author in Brisbane, Australia, who wrote the book, The Psychopath Epidemic, Why the World is So Fucked and What You Can Do About It. That was a little interesting conversation. And then Elias Theodoru, who is Canada's favorite MMA fighter, is here to talk about how he achieved the first professional sports exemption to use cannabinoids as in his recovery routine. Gary Clark joins us from CDNPalladium. That's the Palladium company that's exploring a deposit in eastern Ontario. And then Quentin Yeri is here, wrapping up our incredible week of PDAC coronavirus.
What a slate of interviews here.
This is a remarkable day. This is not your average day. In fact, if you notice, there's very little to do with cannabis. Elias, right. We're talking about cannabis. And
McDonald pulled a monster hole and announced it just a couple days before PDAC.
No shit. That's just unbelievable, Ed.
Well,
holy fuck.
I'm no geologist.
Tell us more.
I'm no geologist, but that was a
big hole.
That was a beauty.
Like a really big hole.
Well, I don't know about big hole, but let's say chock full of.
Just your average run-of-the-mill asshole. I don't know why anybody watches us. Anyways, here's Elias Theodoru telling us how he became the world's first professional athlete to be granted an exemption to use cannabinoids in his recovery regime. My next guest is Elias the Spartan Theodoru. Elias, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me.
Elias, congratulations on achieving the first exemption as a professional athlete to be allowed to use cannabinoids as part of your medical regime.
Yes.
And that's quite amazing.
Yeah, and first of its kind in any capacity in professional sports.
Sure.
It sets precedent for myself, but also all other athletes. The avenue that I did it through was through the British Columbia Athletic Commission. Now, because of my process and approval, it's opened the doors for all other MMA fighters and boxers, both amateur and professional, to apply for their own therapeutic use exemption if appropriate. Mm-hmm. Moreover, It also allowed, once again, because I attacked this therapeutic use exemption on different aspects with my counsel. One of them was, again, my medical needs as a patient, but also the standard of testing that they have. They have a one size fits all in the capacity of whether you're a 115-pound woman competing or you're a 265-pound man competing. They have the same standard of test, which is ridiculous because every
blood
body
content is
fat solubles, et cetera, thresholds. For instance, one of my friends who's a professional fighter, he's a heavyweight. He got flagged for cannabis in his system. His win was overturned. He was suspended for, I think, 6 to 8 months. They penalized him, they fined him, and in addition, when he did his own private test, because it was weeks, if not almost a month, when he last medicated, it took 81 days for it to get out of his system, because again, he's just a bigger dude, and the same aspect would happen for females because of their body. And again, that standard of testing actually persecutes different athletes for their bodies, whether it's, again, a larger heavyweight or a smaller female straw weight.
Sure. So was that your friend, was he under the UFC at the time?
No, another organization. Again, as a blanket term, cannabis is a prohibited substance in athletics in general. So that's why, again, this is the first of its kind in any aspect. Obviously, we've seen different organizations, different leagues, different sports remove the testing, but this is not only a therapeutic use exemption, and what that exactly means is it's the first case that cannabis is considered and approved as medicine in sport. And the implications, again, go beyond what I've opened the door for all other athletes in British Columbia, both at boxing and amateur, boxing and MMA as mentioned. But now, because of the way the North America Athletic Commissions work in cohesion to have a comprehensive standard, they respect the rulings of other jurisdictions. So for the both for the positive and negative aspects. So for instance, if I was to, let's say, get caught with a steroid in New York and I was suspended for a year, California wouldn't approve me to compete there until my suspension is up. Now too, the therapeutic use exemption would be accepted as a ruling, and in any jurisdiction in the US and Canada that has medical cannabis, I would be a candidate to an approval there, just because of the way the system works. So ironically enough, no longer with the UFC and a free agent now, I can still be an agent of change for medical cannabis in athletics.
You bet. What do you use cannabis for medically?
I have bilateral neuropathy, so it's essentially nerve damage of my upper extremities.
As a result of your career?
My career, but also in a previous life, I was a semi-pro skateboarder. So I used to jump off of very tall sets of handrails and stairs before I realized I'm terrified of heights. So
you've been a fan of giving yourself a beating for years.
Yeah, different directions, right? Whether it's gravity or another person punching me in my head. But specifically, I had surgery in my wrist, two broken bones and a couple of fractures. They made me a bone graft where they took bone and cartilage out of my hip and replaced my wrist. From there, there was degeneration, arthritis, neuropathy that developed as well. And then my career itself, the right side in regards to my neck and my elbow, there's stingers, radiating heat, and other type of detrimental aspects that affect me and my quality of life, both as a athlete and a patient, and that's where the two brackets where I fall under.
Sure, so it's primarily for pain mitigation then?
Pain management, yes, and obviously the anti-inflammatory components that come with it in regards to alleviating it. Again, more and more research has been showing that inflammation in general is the cause of a lot of different ailments and diseases throughout the spectrum. So in my specific case, cannabis is the only medicine that works for me individually as a patient, and all other aspects which I was forced to exhaust in this process just compound not only the debilitating symptoms that I have, but also the side effects as well. Being forced as a professional athlete, not even as a patient, but as a professional athlete, to compete at the highest level when told I'm not allowed to take my medicine, and forced to take alternatives that, again, give me side effects that really hinder my ability to compete. But now, with a therapeutic use exemption, I'm able to compete at a even playing field, and more importantly, as a Canadian, to exercise my fundamental right to medicate as prescribed by my doctor and open up that door for all other athletes.
Beautiful. Do you know of other athletes as a result of your success who are now moving towards receiving an exemption?
I don't know specifically if that's the case, but many different athletes have reached out to me, both in regards to BC, Canada, MMA fighters, boxers, also other Olympians, because they're under the same protocols under the World Anti-Doping Agency, which sees cannabis as a prohibited substance. So unfortunately for the US athletes, they don't have the avenue of medical rights that we are lucky to have here in this country.
Due to the federal prohibition in the States.
Federal prohibition, and that was one of the uphill battles in regards to my therapeutic use exemption with USADA. They are primarily funded by the U.S. government, which looks at cannabis as a Schedule I drug, which means there's no there's no medical property to it, technically under their regulations. So the interesting aspect, again, the different avenues I was able to attack this therapeutic use exemption, both as a medical aspect, the standard of testing, and also my fundamental rights afforded to me under the Charter of Rights and Freedom in Canada, and more so, without the technical term, I always mess it up, but essentially there's more rights afforded to me as a patient and without medical persecution and under the Disability Act that Canada has.
Very cool. So do you think that professional sports could be one of the primary avenues by which maybe the U.S. federal government will begin to consider changing the law, because there is so much desire on the part of professional athletes to access cannabinoids, CBD for pain and sleep, and THC for other things as well? Do you think that's going to happen?
I think definitely, because we have a platform that expands to the masses and can really be a game changer. Obviously, there's other individuals and sectors of the country in the U.S., but also even here in Canada, that are still under the prohibition based on their medical rights and needs. I can bring up myself as an athlete, other athletes as mentioned, but also first responders, union workers, and even veterans in some capacity have some restrictions in their cannabis use as professionals.
You bet. All right, Elias, that's a great update, and really appreciate your advocacy for cannabis. Thanks very much for joining us again.
Always a pleasure.
You think you could take Elias, Edward?
Well, maybe if he was blindfolded and his hands were tied behind his back.
Then you think you'd have a chance?
You know what? I'm not a fighter. At the end of the day, it's a different man's game.
Yeah.
Bit of a lover, yeah.
Well, really?
Well, in my own mind, legend in my own mind.
I used to fight with my brother a lot.
I've heard battles between brothers can get very violent.
Yeah, we got to the point when our mid-teens, I used to always win until he started catching up to me in size in our late teens. And then we had a couple of scrums where victory was dubious as to who actually prevailed, because both parties were beaten to pulps, and I think that was when we stopped fighting.
Brutally.
Yeah, it began to cost too much. Let's just say that I was no longer guaranteed.
Well, remember when Gronk was on, he said he used to battle with his brothers, but his dad said there's a couple rules. You don't hit anybody in the balls, or you got to have some rules, right? Like,
we had no rules. But there was, we had no pre-agreed upon rules, but certainly there was no dirty fighting. There was no biting, no hair pulling, no fucking sacking or any of that. No. I don't know why it didn't.
Sacking or?
Sacrilege.
Oh. Or sucking. No.
Speaking of sacking.
Evenco just got halted. IROC just halted Evenco.
Wow, that's...
There's a few stocks that have been halted lately.
Yeah. I wonder why. Interestingly, Did you know that in the capital markets, the ratio of psychopaths to normal people is like 20 times higher than it is in the regular population? If you're in the capital markets business, i.e. banking, promoting, underwriting, analysis, anything, your chances of being a psychopath are 20 times higher. And a gentleman by the name of Cameron Reilly, based in Brisbane, Australia, wrote a book called The Psychopathic Epidemic, The Psychopath Epidemic, where he talks about, why this is. And I thought it would be a good idea to catch up with him and have a conversation. I'm joined now by Cameron Reilly. He is the author of The Psychopath Epidemic, a book that deals with the subject of why the world is so fucked up and what you can do about it. Cameron, welcome.
Hi, James. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Cameron, what caused you to write this book?
I was trying to encapsulate my thoughts on why it is that almost every day, it seems, in the news, I read about people in positions of power and wealth, leadership, in business, politics, religion, law enforcement, the military, the media, etc., just doing deplorable things. Like, I expected these people to be leading the world and building a vision, leading us forward to a better place. And yet, too often we see them just doing things that most of us would never consider. Mm-hmm. And then so trying to come up with a theory for explaining that, I ended up reading a couple of books on psychopaths and realized that when you look at the behavioral tendencies that are innate to psychopaths, according to psychiatrists, which are, for example, their empathy center is broken. They don't feel guilt when they hurt other people. They have a lack of conscience. They have a very high appetite for risk. They have the ability to charm people around them. And they have an innate feeling of superiority and a belief that they deserve to have wealth and power and are willing to do whatever it takes to get that wealth and power. You take those and you overlap them with the sorts of behaviors that many of our organizations tend to incentivize. It becomes quite clear that psychopaths, if they land in these organizations, and again, I'm not just talking about business organizations, all sorts of organizations, on the left and the right, a number of them will probably do quite well and will rise into positions of senior management. And so if you think that we have a certain number of psychopaths in positions of senior management in all these sorts of different kinds of organizations, who are single-mindedly pursuing their own power and wealth and don't really care what happens to the people around them, either in their organization or externally in the general public, or what they do to the environment or what they do to the economy, the broader economy. As long as they do well out of it, everything just seemed to snap into place.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you've just described me perfectly there, unfortunately. And so that was my great fear, is that I might fall into that category. Now, I'm kidding, of course. However, I do work in capital markets, and I do notice that the more successful participants in the capital markets exhibit a number of the qualities which you've just described, particularly those associated with a high risk tolerance and a apparent disregard for the outcomes of others around them as a result of their actions. So then, what is the cause then of this presence of psychopathy in the human population?
Well, I don't think anyone really knows, James. I work on the assumption that it's a natural malfunction in the production of humans. Psychopaths tend to be born that way, something broken with the development of their brain, the empathy center part of their brain. I mean, look, all of us can do bad things. We all lie and cheat and steal and betray the faith of others on occasion. But when we do that, evolution has engineered us to feel bad about it. We worry about the consequences. We worry about getting caught and what that's going to mean for our relationships or our business. We worry about being exposed, and consequently we have guilt, we have anxiety, we lose sleep, etc. When psychopaths do those things, on the other hand, they go to bed and have the best night's sleep they've ever had. They do those things and feel like a winner. They don't feel that sort of anxiety. So I think these people have probably always been around. I'm a historian by profession. I study ancient history and I study the leaders, the people that have dominated our histories, going back to ancient Greece and ancient Rome through to Napoleon and the Cold War. And it's quite easy to see that a lot of these people may have been psychopaths. I think what's happened today, though, the reason why I called the book The Psychopath Epidemic, is I think that capitalism over the last 100 or so years has made it much easier for psychopaths to rise into positions of wealth and power. You think about it, 500 years ago, if you were born a psychopath in a small little village in the middle of Europe somewhere, your ability to get yourself into a position of power and wealth was relatively limited. If you weren't born into the nobility, your ability to get out of your circumstances was quite tough. Not that it was impossible, but it was extremely difficult to do if you were born to a poor farmer somewhere in the middle of Europe. Today, though, it doesn't matter really where you're born. It's quite easy to get on a bus, get on a train, go to the nearest major metropolis, get a low-level job, get an education, get a low-level job, and work your way up through the ranks, hacking and slaying your way as you go to achieve a position of power. So I think it's much easier, and consequently I think more of, let's say the 1% of the population rank highly on the psychopath scale, a lot more of that 1% are able to get their hands on power and wealth today than ever before in human history.
That's a good point. Okay, let me ask you this. So if you were to say that the existence of the competitive impetus versus the cooperative impetus were represented in sort of juxtaposing Darwinism versus, call it, Christian values, for want of another term. Do you think that psychopathy is a natural expression of the Darwinistic impetus of survival of the life force, and whereas the Christian sort of empathy and emotional sort of concern for the well-being of others is a result of an evolved personality that has moved away from the survival instinct and therefore has the luxury of being concerned for others because they are not daily faced with their own survival?
No, I think I operate on the basis that evolution has built empathy into us. If you think about a tribal scenario 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, if you were the kind of person that was regularly screwing over the other people in your tribe, just being a bad person to the other members of the tribe, you probably weren't going to survive very long. You would have got kicked out of the tribe or pushed over the edge of a cliff.
Or you'd be made the king.
Well, in some instances, yes. And obviously psychopaths did survive and did manage to put together coalitions of tribes and build armies and civilization. But they I think, would have been the rarity that managed to survive the early years. You know, psychopathic behavior becomes evident in your teenage years. And if you were a 15-year-old in a tribe that was just causing havoc and trouble, your survival chances probably weren't very high. And so the people that did have a normal empathy center were more likely to survive and copulate and pass on their empathy genes to the next generation. But some psychopaths did make it. I think that's probably always been the situation, that there is a small percentage of people, very small, say 1% of people, that were born with broken empathy centers. And the majority of them still today probably get weeded out of the population. Not every psychopath rise to a position of white-collar power. A number of them probably burn too many bridges along the way. They may not have the IQ to succeed. They may not navigate the maze successfully early on and destroy their reputation and people get wind of it. But enough, like 1% of the population of the United States is a couple of million people. In Australia, it's a few 100,000 people. Globally, it's probably 60 million people. It doesn't take more than a small percentage of those psychopaths to rise to positions of power, and we have a very big problem on our hands.
Sure. So your conclusion is on the book is interesting in that you make it very clear that you don't have all the answers and that we have to work this out together. But before you can have any sort of positive impact, my interpretation of your conclusion is that you've got to have your own shop very much in order, which is a really refreshing sort of place to wrap it all up, is to say that, like, you're not necessarily perfect. You're working on, obviously, achieving a better self, and you want to achieve a better self. That's the motivation for this book, I think, if I was to, sort of draw a conclusion. But so what do you think that the ratio of psychopaths is rising, and this is something that we have to actively and consciously combat collectively as a society? Or do you think that this is just sort of like a persistent feature of the bad side of humanity?
Well, yes and yes. I argue in the book that the number one problem facing the world today is psychopaths in positions of power. I think if you look at all of the existential issues that we're facing as a species, whether it's climate change or nuclear proliferation or the differential in wealth or just the tensions, the global tensions that we have around the world between fundamentalists, etc. You can trace all of them back to psychopaths being in positions of power. If we can limit the ability of psychopaths in all of our organizations to lead us down dangerous paths, I think we'll be able to solve all of these existential problems a lot faster. They're always going to be here, but the reason I wrote the book is I think most people still associate psychopaths with serial killers, and we can thank Hollywood for that. Variety of TV shows and movies over the years that have painted out psychopaths to be serial killers. I like to point out in the book that I think your garden variety psychopath, your average psychopath, is more likely to be the movie studio bosses or the directors of those films and TV shows than actual serial killers. So the main point of the book is to get people to recognize the existence of psychopaths in positions of power and the threat that we are faced with if we leave them with this unchecked power.
Sure. Okay, well, that's great, Cameron. We're going to leave it there for now. If I wanted to buy this book, could I go to Amazon.com?
You could. Amazon, Bible, every good bookstore, online, offline, should have it on the shelf. A very prominent place in the window, and if they don't, I think you should complain.
Okay, Cameron. Well, we'll come back to you for another conversation every time a psychopath inflicts some damage on our society in a position of leadership. We'll come to you for a interpretation. So thanks very much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, James.
If you're enjoying the show, subscribe to Midas Letter on YouTube so you stay up to date on everything investment. Well, this is the thing. What's the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath? Ed?
Well,
which one are you? First of all, which one are you?
It's spelled differently.
Wow, you're saying the only difference is that it's spelled differently? No, come on.
Well, it's spelled differently, and that leads to a different meaning.
Okay, what is the difference between a sociopath?
I think a sociopath is a milder form of psychopath. Like a sociopath, they talk about sociopathic behavior, maybe you're a little detached, you don't really sort of blend.
Sociopaths tend to be more manipulative, can be seen by others as more charming, lead a semblance of a normal life, and minimize risk in criminal activities, whereas sociopaths tend to be more erratic,
a psychopath or a sociopath? I'm sorry, you said sociopath both times.
Psychopath was the first thing I said.
Oh, it's psychopath.
The psychopath tends to be more manipulative, can be easily more charming, leads a semblance of a normal life, minimizes risk in criminal activities, whereas sociopaths tend to be more erratic, reckless, rage-prone, and unable to mask their disdain for the rest of us.
Sociopath. Really? So sociopath sounds like a little bit crazier.
Well, psychopath sounds like a mild form of sociopathy, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think I'm a psychopath.
Oh, really?
I don't know.
I think you're a psychopath.
I'm detached. I know that. I know I don't.
I think that. See, this is the one thing I disagreed with. I think that psychopathy is an over-clinicalization of what is simply the manifestation of the survival instinct as the absolute imperative in a certain subset of human beings.
Yeah.
Some people have an overriding empathy for human beings that subordinates.
Yeah, like Mother Teresa.
Mother Teresa,
yeah.
Case in point. Though I'm pretty sure she used to beat the shit out of old men behind the back of the charity.
Who's hot? And who's hot with candy?
Ed's lost his marbles. Ed, are you having an embolism? Then you wouldn't be a sociopath anymore or a psychopath.
No, I'd be a vegetable.
Well, you'd be fertilizer.
I'd be shite. Two Trailer Park Girls going round the outside, round the outside.
Round the outside, coming around the clubhouse turn. You know, we haven't really had much of a conversation with our audience.
Let's do that.
Anymore, but I see that Shivet Ketostatic
That's all, folks.
Is with us again. Shivet, great to see you. You're one of the most loyal viewers in the planet. We have some new people who I haven't seen here. There's somebody called, where did it go? Oh, hold on, I lost the page. Fuck, I hate it when that happens. You know, this is episode number 313, but next week is Friday the 13th, which will be episode 314. This is amazing. The rate of our episode numerical nominal growth has basically chopped by a factor of 5 since we started doing this one day a week. What is up with that? Is that just a mathematical thing? Anyways, Nika Domi is here too. Hi, Nika. Hello, JG. Hello, JG. M. Wilson, what's new here? What's new here? What's new there? What do you mean, man? Nothing's new here. Oh, some things are new here. What's new here? New York, New York.
New.
No, let's see what's new here. What's going on? Chiron has gone into Peru. That's new. So we'll be the competition's starting to heat up in Peru. Peru right now is running a tender for companies to provide cannabinoids to the government of Peru, to the medical authority.
To the officials running the country?
Well, them too. They're the quality control unit. But that's there's going to be a few competitors in that little mix.
I'd want to be in the quality control area.
Well, I'm sure you would. Actually, you'd want to be in the reject zone.
But we're still seeing epic moves in interest rates. Oil's dropped off the...
Oh, yeah. We talk about stocks here. I forgot about that.
I'm just, throwing in a few things here, tidbits.
Yeah, I haven't even looked at our own cannabis index page for a long time.
Really?
I should probably pull up the NDI effect. Is that happening for you, Donald?
I noticed that Weed MD, or not Weed MD, but Weed Canopy is down to $20.
Wow, you're an observant little fellow, aren't you?
Yeah.
Look at this. Look at this. Look at these charts, people. So now we have a case where we can qualitatively say that the
things are going lower.
Deterioration in the cannabis industry of publicly traded companies is going yet lower. It is now at its lowest level in all 4 indexes that it's ever been in the history of the cannabis market. Like, look at the venture index is down to 226. It started at 0, and it's now down to 226. Actually, no, wait a second. If it started
at 0, it's got to be up to 226.
It started at 500.
Oh, okay.
So this is the interesting thing. The valuations are now lower than when these indexes started. Man, that's just pathetic. Let's see who's leading it to the downside in the large caps. We go to the index page and we get an ad for subscription to the Midas Letter. Weed is trading at $20. Curaleaf is $6.43. Curaleaf is holding in there at that price. Kronos Group holding in at $7.64, down 31 cents today. Canopy lost 10% today.
Did you see where Tilray came out with the results and they were actually down in the quarter in terms of revenue? That's not a good sign.
Yeah.
That stock was $300 at the very peak for one iota.
At the height of the pump, you mean?
Height of the short
the
squeeze.
start of the dump.
And now it's $10. That's a good round.
Tilray is $10?
10 and change, I think, yeah.
Jesus. Hexo's down to $1.46.
Oh, yeah.
Charlotte's Web is $6.43. That's below its IPO price.
10.03 on Tilray.
And even Organigram's down to $2.62. This whole market, like the way these stocks are acting, it's like the market is saying, we don't care if you're profitable. We don't care if you're making money. If you're in the cannabis game, we're taking you to zero. What the fuck have we got to zero? That's the way it's going to be. So let's see what happens with Chiron when they make the announcement that they're going into the other market, into
Peru?
Into Peru.
67.
67. Up on the day? Or no effect? Nothing.
I think it's been a little higher, maybe in the low 70s, 73, 74.
Oh, okay.
75, 76.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, what about, okay, we got more people coming up, don't we?
We have, right now, we're going to hear from Mr. Wonderful himself. Kevin O'Leary joins us to talk about MindMed. I'm joined now by a man who really needs no introduction. Mr. Kevin O'Leary is my guest today. Kevin, welcome.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Kevin, we're here today to talk about MindMed, a company in which you've made an investment. What can you tell me about MindMed?
So there's been a really interesting development. These are compounds and drugs from the 60s. For example, LSD or psilocybin from mushrooms. These are psychedelic drugs that were, at that time, misused or overdosed by people and became Schedule I narcotics. Even in those times, though, there's some nascent research being done because it looked like these, as medicines, could help some really difficult afflictions people suffer. For example, depression, or alcohol addiction, or now opioid addiction. So if you can solve for alcoholism or just opioid, just take opioid in the United States right now as an affliction, costs the country billions of dollars and all kinds of costs to society and business. So all of a sudden, a new industry is emerging, psychedelics as medicine. Now, when I was approached with this investment, I said, wait a second, this sounds like cannabis part 2, and I want nothing to do with it. I never invested in cannabis because it was a Schedule I narcotic. It still is. There's RICO statutes across state lines. But the more I heard about it, the more I got intrigued, because if you can solve from a medical basis any of the afflictions I just detailed, those are huge opportunities. When I finally met the CEO, JR, I asked him, look, are you ever getting into recreational drugs here? Because if you are, tell me now. I don't want to waste my time or my team's time doing due diligence. They're not interested in that market at all. So all of a sudden now I can invest at an early stage in a company that I think, this is my own speculation, there's going to be tremendous institutional interest in. I work in the indexing business, in ETFs. So I speak to sovereign funds, pension plans who never participated in cannabis and never will. The industry tried to promote the fact that they were going to get institutions involved, they never did. This industry, it's different. There's a tremendous interest, and that's why I'm interested, because to bring new medicines to market requires a tremendous amount of capital. But if you're right, the returns are extraordinary.
So then is MindMed in the process of developing what will be FDA pathway drugs for full medical prescription?
They have multiple trials going on, FDA-approved trials in multiple jurisdictions and geographies. They have a wide range of scientists they're working with. They have an incredible story about already the advancements they've made in trials. It's a really intriguing situation. The anecdotal evidence, and I'm not endorsing this at all when I say this though, but when I was doing due diligence, I was hearing these stories about engineers on the West Coast of the United States microdosing and getting extraordinarily good outcomes. Not hallucinating, but getting a tremendous productivity out of it. Now, I'm not endorsing that. It's illegal. But when you hear that kind of thing, that anecdotal information intrigues you to explore the use of these drugs as medicines. And so that's what MindMed is doing, and that's why I'm an early investor in it.
So specifically, is it LSD and psilocybin and mescaline and ayahuasca, all those
It's
experimenting?
all of the opportunities those present, because they're all different, and they all have different attributes. But the whole idea here is to make a medicine. You take out the psychedelic experience because people want to be able to work and drive and everything else, and you want it FDA approved, so it's not illegal. And if we get there, let's just pick one market, and I detailed it earlier. opioid addiction, which is such a wicked affliction to the United States and Canada and Mexico. We're working on that. We're working on depression. We're working on alcoholism, all of these things, and they all have promise. So there's no guarantees when you're developing medicine. But when you can solve problems, take for example ADD in children, all the drugs we pump them full of. Imagine if this works towards that affliction.
Sure.
So that's why I'd like to think it's wide open. All the companies involved in this area are doing a lot of research in a lot of different afflictions. It's not just MindMed, it's a nascent industry emerging here. I'm making my bets because I want to know that the company I invest in will never touch recreational drugs. I can't participate in that for a whole bunch of institutional reasons. But I'm happy this one is doing it for medicine, and that's a great enterprise.
Sure. So from your understanding, what is the timeline until we actually see these medicines make their way into the pharmacopoeia?
Well, I'm investors in other medicines too. There is no point in talking timeline.
Right.
I mean, you can set goals, but there's so many things out of your control. What you're looking for is encouraging results in the trials as you keep moving towards approval as a medicine. So the way we value these companies in an industry, and you pick any one that develops medicine, is if you keep moving forward, you become more valuable. You're not knowing the outcome. You don't know. But I've been involved in one called NONO, which is a stroke medicine here in Canada. Very promising. It's going into its 11th year, still in the trials. But the information looks encouraging, so I stay the course and I keep participating and adding more to my position. The same thing will occur here with MindMed.
Fascinating. I'm curious as to what roadblocks might exist to the actual successful evolution of this fully through the regulatory process.
Well, first of all, because we're not pursuing any legal recreational drugs, we're not going to get stuck with lobby groups like Mothers Against Drug Driving. They endorse the development of medicines that are FDA approved. We are pursuing an FDA approved path. So our risks are timing, bad outcomes of trials, side effects, if any, all of the things that you run into when you're doing medicines. But the fact that we're not going to have to fight and lobby to say that you have to change the laws to bring this forward. And I'd argue, and again, this is a personal opinion, but one of the reasons I invested personally was if the trials show positive outcomes on opioid addiction, just opioid addiction, my guess is regulators fast-track those medicines. It is such a horrific problem right now all around the world. Opioid addiction brings tragedy almost wherever it touches a family. And if there was a resolution to that or a medicine that could assist it, I think regulators would want to accelerate that process to get it turned into a legal medicine.
So there could be a really short timeline to
There could be, and I'm speculating when I say that, but you talk about an affliction like that, a multi-billion-dollar affliction, there's a tremendous interest to solve it.
Sure. So how does a company like MindMed source the actual inputs for these chemical compounds in this early research stage?
A lot of work. They've got to go. There's research going on all around the world. So if you're going to be a MindMed, you're going to have to work with scientists in multiple jurisdictions, in Switzerland, in South America, in the United States, in Canada. You want to find the best teams and you want to find the best places to put the trials forward. You can have an FDA-approved trial in Switzerland if you want. I mean, these rules are set internationally. So the company's job is to take the capital they raised today. It went public on the NEO Exchange today. They've done very, very well. Is to put it to work all around the world and accelerate trials that are FDA-approved trials. I think they're going to do just that. They've got a fantastic management team, because I had a chance to meet the scientists and the CEO and the board and the chair of the board, all people that have a motivation to help solve some of man's worst afflictions.
Kevin, that's an amazing story. We're going to leave it there for now, but I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
You bet. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Make sure you never miss a show by subscribing to our YouTube channel and clicking on the little notifications bell. Now, I wonder if Kevin would consider inviting the company onto Shark Tank. I guess he couldn't if he's an investor in it already.
Well, he probably could figure a way around it.
Yeah, I would think so. Do you think that they would give out some samples to the sharks they're assembled? Well, although Kevin made it clear that he does not condone recreational use of drugs and wants no part of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, to each his own, I say. What do you think?
You know what I think? I think it's been an unbelievable week in the credit markets as interest rates.
No, I meant about his MindMed products.
Well, that's another topic altogether, isn't it?
It certainly is. Are you on them right now?
No, I'm on right now.
What are you on?
I'm high on life.
You're high on life. Are you pleased to
Right
be
now?
here right now, Edward?
Yeah, you can only be where you are.
It's a joyous thing.
It's good. It's good. It's a nice liberating feeling.
Right. Especially, so what a day. We talk about psychopaths, sociopaths, MindMed drugs. I mean, this show just getting more and more interesting. I don't believe that we have so few subscribers. I mean, really, they should replace...
They can hit the anonymous button, right?
Yeah, they should replace some online show with some TV show with ours. Now, in an effort to maintain our rapid clip of and density of previously unknown information that is actionable and potentially profitable. By the way, I don't have stock in anything that we've talked about today. Neither does Ed. So there's no bias here. There's no pumping. It's no dumping. Gary Clark is here from Canadian Palladium, and Palladium, if you haven't noticed, has even increased by 20% since the beginning of the year, has doubled in price in the last 20 months. Gary Clark joins me now. He is the independent geologist for Canadian Palladium. Gary, welcome.
Nice to meet you.
You bet. Gary, let's start with an overview of the deposit that Canadian Palladium is working on.
So what we have there basically is a zone that strikes probably 3 kilometers long. It's been explored down to about 125 meters on about 1.8 kilometers. So what we're going to do is infill it and expand it and bring it up to, right now we have 500,000 ounces of palladium equivalent, and we're heading towards 1.5 million. That's our target.
Okay. Is it safe to categorize this as a primary palladium deposit?
Yeah,
Really?
basically it's palladium.
Oh, okay.
So it's the results we put out this week, you know, that people have seen.
Yeah.
You know, we've got some...
Those are good grades.
Good grades.
Those are some of the best grades I've ever seen.
Exactly, yeah.
So I've never seen a primary palladium deposit. What is the host rock? What's the geological setting?
The geological setting is it's an intrusive. So if you think of a wine glass, basically this comes in and shaped like a wine glass, and we're looking at the base of the wine glass, and we're on one side of the wine glass, and we're working away on that.
Oh, very cool. How long has this deposit been known about?
The first drilling on it was probably in the 70s, but the most recent volume of work was in 99, 2000. But at the time, it was palladium rich. Palladium wasn't worth as much as it is now. So it didn't have enough platinum, so people walked away from it.
That's interesting. Now, palladium and platinum have switched places in the pricing scheme of things because they've started using palladium in lieu of platinum in the catalytic converter. Now, was that originally caused by the fact that palladium was like 1/3 of the price of platinum, and now it's reversed? So is there a chance that the pendulum swings back towards platinum in industrial use?
The thing with palladium is it's actually a better catalyst than platinum in most cases.
Okay.
And what's happened now is that people are getting used to using palladium instead of platinum. So that's where we're headed, and it's not going to change.
Sure.
The biggest issue right now is probably the fact that you have these other deposits that are richer in platinum, and they're actually soaking the market in platinum. But palladium still is rare.
Right.
You know, there's only 2 of them, and 2 producers in North America.
Oh, really?
To produce palladium purely.
Okay. And is it the case geologically that palladium and platinum always occur together, or not the case?
Very often they appear together.
Okay.
And we call it the PGEs. So it's the platinum group elements. There's also rhodium.
Okay.
And rhodium's worth like $10,000 an ounce.
Wow.
So we have that too, but it's not as much. But I mean, our target is the palladium, obviously.
Yeah. Okay. So when you say 500,000 ounces palladium equivalent, what is the makeup of that?
Most of it is palladium.
Okay.
And then there's some copper and nickel.
Okay.
And some platinum.
Right.
And some rhodium.
Oh, okay. Well, that's cool. So it's like an embarrassment of riches in there.
Yeah, it is. And, and we had core out on display at the show here in Toronto, and you can't see it, and that's the biggest problem. Is
Right.
you can't. It's not easy to identify where it is.
Sure.
We know where it is because of the type of rocks we're looking at. But you're always kind of surprised at what the grade is.
Yeah. What sort of techniques do you use to identify the shape and where the sort of sweet spot is in the deposit?
Well, we're always looking to see if there's any chalcopyrite, which is copper.
Yeah.
And that usually drives you towards where you want to be. It's the more chalcopyrite you see, or the more pyrite, like just iron sulfides.
Yeah.
That's what you're targeting.
Is it an environment where the deposit is, where you're close to all of the infrastructure that you need to be close to?
We're only 90 kilometers from Sudbury.
Okay.
And Sudbury is like one of the most known copper nickel deposits in the world.
Yeah, I think Sudbury was ground zero for Canadian mining.
Exactly. That was one of the very beginning.
So it seems odd that this deposit hasn't been looked at in the past. Like, why didn't anybody go after it?
Part of it was the price of palladium was lower.
Right.
So now all of a sudden the price of palladium is better.
Right.
Around us, from our property, there's another company that has most of it tied up, and they've had it tied up since 2000.
Oh, and are they working it?
Yeah, they're working it. They're and we have a handshake agreement with them to work together.
Okay.
And share information.
Right. Excellent. And what's the appetite of investors you talk to at the PDAC? Are they interested? Do they understand the dynamics of palladium and what's driving it?
It's taken about a year and a half for people to understand what palladium really is used for and what it, how valuable it is. Last year we were trying to raise money and we had a hard time because people just didn't understand it. But we're not going from combustion engines to electric engines or electric motors that quickly. We can't. We just can't move that fast. So the palladium is very important in the catalytic converters and will be the hybrid end. So that's why now all of a sudden it's that much price-wise.
Sure. Do you think there's a risk of, as electric cars gain market share, do they have the potential to disrupt the sort of price trajectory that palladium's been on lately?
No, I don't think so, because the other end of it is that palladium is used as in electric battery. So it's
it is?
as conductors and.
Well, that's a happy coincidence.
Yeah, but not as much as in catalytic converters. But
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So now, what about metallurgy? How difficult is it to produce purified palladium?
To get it out.
Yeah.
Because it reports with the sulfides, they're heavier, so
Okay.
you can float them out of the rock. It's pretty straightforward.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So, do you have an idea of recoveries at this point?
No, but usually recoveries are anywhere between 80 and 95%.
Oh, okay, great. And what about, is there NSRs on the property?
We have a 0.5% NSR on part of it and a 1% on the other part.
Okay, great. And what's the rest of the exploration program look like for 2020?
We are 1,000 meters into a 10,000 meter program.
Oh, so there's going to be a continuous stream of news.
We're going to have lots of news coming out.
Oh, wow. Okay, well that's encouraging. Awesome. What are where are the risk factors in this whole play?
The risk is that we can't prove what we think we have. That's the only risk.
That's the only risk.
Truthfully, it's pretty risk protected.
Right.
We have a highway that goes right by the project. We have electric hydro lines that feed Sudbury that go right across the project.
Permitting is not going to be a problem, obviously.
No, and what we'll end up with is not a mine with a mill, but we'll end up with basically a quarry, where you just take the rock out of the ground, grind it up, and ship it to Sudbury.
Huh. Interesting. I'll have to come and visit with the camera crew.
Yeah, well, we're going to do that in the spring when there's lots of bugs there.
Oh, perfect, great. All right, Gary, that's a great introduction to the company. We'll leave it there for now and come back to you when you've got some more drill results. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you very much.
If you're enjoying the show, subscribe to Midas Letter on YouTube so you stay up to date on everything investment. Well, there's differences in our DNA characteristics that determine whether we become a geologist or a psychopath or a mind...
Sure, but there's nothing that says that
Sorry, everybody, we're just in the mid-argument.
somebody
here. We'll
says,
be right with you.
there's nothing that says, from the universe's perspective, that someone is a king.
Good point.
or a
There are
president.
no king genes. Anyways, Nikodomi JG, I see the conversation is very animated here on the chat room today. Nikodomi is telling me that the scattered approach is not working for her, and she's only trading 1 or 2 names, and she likes Balance Grow the most now. How about that? Huh? Not a bad choice. Actually, have you noticed that MetaPharm and Balance Grow are 2 of the best performing stocks in the whole cannabis sector now, thanks to everything else going down? And they are focused on extracts. Yes, but so there you have it. Palladium in Ontario. Palladium at $2,800 an ounce right now. You know, the interesting thing about that is, used to be that platinum was at $2,800 an ounce, and palladium was at $700 an ounce.
Yeah.
Now they switched places again. You know why?
Because they can.
I guess.
Switch them and switch them back.
There's more palladium than platinum
That's
in the
my
mix.
line as an early broker. Switch them and switch them back.
Like average down.
Switch them.
That's my favorite one. One of my favorite terms from brokers is like, oh, you know, the stock is down. You can average down now. As if like the average that the price is lower is good news, and it's opened up a whole new world of opportunity for me. Ooh. Yeah. There is one saying. If your broker says, you know, this is not a bad place to average down.
I know a broker that, well, I'll remain nameless, but he used to say when the client would call up, he'd say, buy, sell, or hold, 2 out of 3 pay.
I don't know what that means. I don't even know why I'm laughing. Finally, today we have Mr. Quentin Yuri. Here's here from Quentin Yari. Sorry, not Yuri. Quentin Yari is here from McDonald Mining. McDonald Mining drilled a boomer of a hole. You might want to check it out.
Big time.
And so in this rising gold price environment, we're expecting to see a catalyzation of a bull market in junior gold, and this is why we're starting to feature more junior gold. So check out Mr. Yari's operation and see if you don't agree. I'm joined now by Quentin Yari. He's the president and CEO of McDonald Mines. Quentin, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Quentin, you recently put out a eye-popping drill hole, and February 27th you published a press release indicated 735 grams per ton gold over just under a meter. Correct. And that's interesting. 411 grams per ton gold over just under a meter. That's interesting. Yeah. But really, to me, the more exciting thing is the lower grade but much longer intercept of 19.7 meters of 2 ounces per ton, 59.2 grams per ton gold in your North Pit area.
Yes.
So let's talk about this deposit and the history of it and how it came to be yours and where we're at now.
Where we're at now. So location-wise, we're located east of the Sudbury Impact crater, so just on the outside. So it's an interesting area. It's sort of been overlooked, overshadowed by all the infrastructure, of course, for the nickel mining. So on the periphery of the Sudbury Impact Basin, there's always been historic gold operations, generally fairly small and not much understood about them. But their grades were always interesting. You know, you'd see that they'd have average 7 grams per ton gold, but always with copper as well. They'd have significant copper, and there was known to be cobalt also in that camp with silver, a bunch of secondary mineralization. So we looked at that, and we had the opportunity to go scout out some of those areas. What we found was what we believed a better understanding of that area, of the geologic events that unfolded to deposit that type of mineralization there. And the realization of that has been quite new in the industry. The GSC, Geological Survey of Canada, has looked at that area, and we're beginning to believe it's a deep-rooted, large pulse of fluid movement, potentially associated with an IOCG type event.
Which are historically some of the biggest deposits in the world.
There's some of the bigger drivers, for sure. Yeah.
Excellent. Wow. So then this hole that you reported on February 27th, are those 3 intercepts from one hole?
Yes, that is from one hole.
Okay, and so at what depth did these start?
Generally, what we see here is the gold runs from surface. There's a lot of VG on surface
Okay.
when we're working there. The deepest holes we've drilled to 150 meters. We still see mineralization. Obviously, I wish it was those grades, but it's not all of those grades.
Right.
But this is a shallow starting system.
Okay.
We know that historically there were 3 operating pits on the property. They were small, but again, they averaged in those 7 grams per ton
bet.
scenarios. So.
Okay, interesting. Then in February 19th, you announced a hole that was, still impressive. 11 meters of 2.7 grams per ton, 13.4 grams per ton over 1.3 meters, 4.3 grams per ton gold over 4.5 meters. How far away is that hole from the hole you released on February 27th?
We're focused in an area of about 500 meters by 500 meters.
Okay.
Okay, so to say specifically how far those holes are apart is a little difficult at the moment. They would be at least 100, 150 meters apart, those two things. We seem to now have identified a strike length of over 200 meters that is mineralized with gold.
Okay, great.
It's quite exciting, actually, because one of the big thoughts of this area were these things were going to be small. For us, it's proving with this new model that this has the potential to be something much larger. As you mentioned, IOCG type systems are big.
Right.
And this appears to be quite large, over kilometers in length.
Right. So how much drilling do you have left in this program?
This program we were limited to about $500,000 we had budgeted.
Okay.
Our all-in costs there for drilling are quite inexpensive as far as exploration terms goes. That has to do with being in Sudbury.
Sure.
Infrastructure's all there, everything's there. I would imagine we're going to complete another 2,000 to 3,000 meters in the short term.
Okay. And are there more holes from this program at the assay lab yet to come?
Yes, there are.
Oh, okay.
We've been drilling since January. So that was the first hole that we talked about. The 7 grams was started, that was from January 2017. And we're continuing to drill now.
Fantastic. Historically, what has been the exploration on this property before you owned it?
It's been broken. This property has seen fits and starts of exploration on it. It historically had a really complicated ownership structure. There were 2 groups that had 50% each, and it was just hard to get anything done.
Right.
We managed to consolidate the property under Macdonald's by purchasing it from both things. So a much easier system, and we work for ourselves there.
Sure. And so is this the only project of Macdonald, or are you a single project focused company?
Yes, this is a single project for us at the moment. I mean, the McDonald's does have other properties, but this offered some of the things that I mentioned we were looking for. McDonald's came from the Ring of Fire historically a long time ago. Drilling was really expensive. Helicopters are expensive to use.
Right.
In tight markets like this where it's hard to raise money for exploration, we want to make sure that any money we do raise gets as much bang for the buck as we can in an exploration program.
Right. And so the Ring of Fire is another impact crater type of environment, so to speak.
We don't know for sure, but it's a ring. Yeah.
Right, it's a ring. What is it about these, what is the sort of the geological history of that deposit that would cause an iron ore, copper, gold deposit to be so close to the surface?
Generally, these things do subcrop. If you look, even in Australia, they are found on surface. Australia, you're dealing with unconsolidated materials on the surface, so overburn, so to speak. But the expression of these types of events is definitely on the surface of the rock.
Oh, okay. So that's the way they happen.
Yeah.
Great. So do you envision needing to raise more capital to continue drilling once this program is over?
Yes, we do. I
Right.
mean, we are a junior exploration company. We do not generate revenue, so
Right.
to speak. I think we have a very good opportunity here and exciting results. Our plan is to show that there is some size to this thing with excellent grades that start near surface. So yes, we will be going back to the market to raise funds.
Oh, well, great. Okay, so then how did you end up acquiring and consolidating the property? I mean, what caused it to be available?
Well, at the time, it really wasn't available. Let's
Oh.
just start with that. It was, as I mentioned, complicated, but there were 2 parties. One was based in Australia, a company, and the other was local Canadian. It had seen production as late as the late 80s when it ceased.
Oh.
And the company that had then optioned off 50% of it, and that 50% option had moved around between different players.
It had been in production previously?
Yes, like I mentioned, there was 3 historic pits on the property that were in operation, and there's actually a ramp down
Oh.
to about 200 meters.
Oh, so this properties produced gold for people before.
Yeah, and there's
What era of history did that occur?
like I say, it ended in '88.
Oh, okay.
I believe.
1888 or 1988?
1988.
Oh, okay. So not that long ago.
Not that long ago at all.
Very interesting. So is it conceivable that the improvement in exploration technologies is opened a new window of opportunity for this property?
I definitely suggest that's the case.
Right.
A much better understanding of the geology that's driving the gold mineralization there is what's leading to new discoveries.
Sure. And I guess being in what is essentially ground zero for mining in Ontario, there's infrastructure all around you.
There is.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
The opportunities in Sudbury are excellent for miners.
Okay. And is there a NSR on the property or any other ownership encumbrance?
There is a small NSR, but there's a buyback on it. I believe it was, we had 2.5%, but we can buy back half of that. That was part of the transaction to acquire the property.
Interesting. So the near surface nature of this, I think, gives you an advantage over other companies that perhaps have their deposits starting deeper. You're right in the middle of infrastructure. Is it conceivable that with continued exploration success, you might consider a streaming streaming deal that would get you capitalized to construction?
Definitely that's on the table.
Yeah.
Some method whereby Macdonald Mines could generate revenue rather than through equity raises. And I think there's an opportunity at this site to do this.
Okay.
One of the reasons being because it was a past producer, it's already a brownfield. So it's under a closure plan, and in Ontario to change a closure plan to operating status or bulk sampling status is not a huge impediment. We can do it. We have the agreements in place with First Nations already. That's sort of the goal would be to make McDonald self-sustaining.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. What then are your next steps that investors can keep their eye on to see that it's moving in the right direction?
Well, I think the results coming from the current drill holes, I mean, visually we see a lot of visible gold in this stuff. So we know when we're in the system and when we're out of the system. And I think we can expect some exciting results still to come in the next few months.
Okay, well, we'll keep our eye on it. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, there's our show for this Friday, March the whatever it is, number it is, here it is, there it goes, here it was, and thank you very much. We'll see you next week.